Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to African Tea Time. My name is Abby. So if you're here last semester, we've met already. If you haven't, nice to meet you. My name is Abby. I am the graduate assistant at African Tea Time, and I've been running the African Tea Time series since last semester. So this is actually gonna be my last semester running African Tea Time. So from next semester, you might see a new face. But while we're here, yeah, let's have fun with African Tea Time. So today we're going to be discussing political governance and the youth involvement in political governance. And we're going to be talking to Francis. Francis is from Tanzania. He's going to be telling us a little bit about himself and why he thinks he can talk about this. Basically, what makes him qualified to talk about this. And then we're going to be talking to Dr. Chacha from Kenya. So they're going to be telling us about themselves, their background, their experiences, that kind of a thing. And then we're going to be getting into youth involvement in political governance. I mean, I am Kenyan, for those who don't know, and you saw just what happened last year with Gen Z protests in Kenya. It went absolutely crazy. So we're going to be diving into that. And Dr. Chacha, I am looking forward to speaking to you. Francis is going to go first. He's going to tell us about himself. He's going to tell us about what youth involvement in political governance looks like in Tanzania. And then we're going to move into the same discussion with Dr. Chacha about how that looks like in Kenya. And then we're going to end up with questions. We're going to end these with questions. So we're going to start with you. So I'm just going to switch up the camera to capture the entire room. All right. So there's quite a few people here. And then Francis is going to go first, and then we're going to go to Dr. Chacha after. All right?
Good.
So tell us about yourself.
Okay.
No, you can sit there.
Hello, everyone. Actually, I should start by thanking the African Studies Center for inviting me to participate in this good event of sharing my experience about Tanzanian youth and in political participation. So basically, I am Francis Nyonzo from Tanzania. I am in Michigan State University as Hubert Humphrey Fellow. Back home in Tanzania, I am working with a non-government organization. It's called Jamii Forums, a non-government organization that works to promote and advocate for good governance, accountability, digital rights, social justice, democracy. So basically, what I'm going to talk today is actually something that I've been doing for years, because I've been working with Jamii Forums since 2019. I've been engaging in different projects there as a Tanzanian, so I know some issues about the youth, the challenges, the opportunities, and everything. And I've just remained with the only 4 months here. I would love to get back home and to put into practice whatever that I've learned in this program. So that's basically the concept of Humphrey Fellowship is getting back home and doing the things, making the improvements, if you can call it the changes, or whatever that works. So that's it about me. And I don't know if this presentation is visible to everybody out there. And I can say yes. Okay. The population of Tanzanian people is 61 million people, according to the census of 2022. Of course, you may find some different figures for the not census, just a population of 2024. It is about 64 million people, and 21 million people are the people of 15 to 35 years of age, if we can call that the youth population. Now, it is like a discussion, because the policy says the youth are 15 to 35, that's the youth population. But you may find when it comes to politics, maybe that's something different. Somebody who's considered young in politics, maybe somebody of 40 years of age or something. Sometimes it is like when you're 35 or less than that, you may be considered not to be a young person, maybe somebody who is just a child when it comes to politics. So I think the definition of a young person depends on the is it the context or something, whether it is political or economical. But when it comes to economics, you may find that 18 to 35, that's a young population. So basically, that's it. And now, that 21 million people, it is actually 34.5% of the total population. And as for the labor force, that's a very, considering the labor force is having 35 million people, of which that population of 21 million and 21 people is more than 55%. So basically, youth are the change makers, actually, and that is in a very good portion of the labor force, of course. And when it comes to the leadership, I have tried to consult the National Youth Development Policy of 2007, which has been revised in 2024. They have given some issues on governance, how to make young people engage into politics and governance and all those issues. But they have analyzed those challenges, some of the challenges. Of course, some of the issues that they have mentioned in that policy is it is like the young people are not well trained to be in politics and governance issues. If it is true, then I'll just share some of my concepts. Just I start by giving these facts from these just figures. So basically, we know that the good number of young people in the labor force do not participate into politics that much compared to the other people who actually, if you can say, the senior citizens, you can say that. And it is happening like that because they see like they know more than the young people are knowing. And now this is a very big problem, which comes like when these senior citizens do decide for the young people. Even the policy itself, the policy itself has mentioned that it's a problem that you don't find the young people in a lot of these political positions. You won't find them. This is what I have quoted from the policy, the youth policy of 2007 edition, 2024 edition. So there are barriers to leadership programs and all those issues. So that's basically the thing. But now I wanted to share something about the digital world, because the youth, away from all these issues, the government initiatives and everything, of course, one thing that can make these young people participate into politics and all those other issues, it is about the initiatives for them to do things. You will find a lot of laws and regulations which do prohibit these young people from engaging into these political activities and governance, or to say anything which is critical to the government. For example, the basic right of just protesting. It is not easy to protest. You want your things to be heard, but you cannot do that. It's somehow, I mean, it is guaranteed by the Constitution, but it is now on the hands of the police, of the police officers. They will just decide, okay, you can go on, you can protest. If you want to demonstrate anything, okay, you will have to ask for permission from police officers to allow you to go and demonstrate or do anything. And this is why you will find a lot of demonstrations in Tanzania are just those pro-government demonstrations, not those which are going there to present the problems or any concerns about the lives. So this just basically from the system, it is a systematic way of just excluding the young people from engaging into these critical discussions and have their voices heard. And so you will find that that right of just protesting or demonstrating, these people, whenever you find a protest in Tanzania or demonstration in Tanzania, it is something that the government has done it to the extent that nobody can hold it no more. It's different to Kenya, very different to Kenya, of course. Chacha is going to talk about that. The good thing is we are now in the digital world, and the young people in Tanzania are the ones who are, I mean, a good number of young people in Tanzania do own these smartphones. They are the great portion that has a lot of these smartphones compared to the older people. Now, this is like a gap. The young people are online while these elder senior citizens are not online. It is like a gap now, which now brings this problem. Whenever something is, so basically I wanted to say like, Tanzanians do protest and do demonstrations and all those strikes, but online, just online. It is just because they have access to the online platforms. In 2022, there was this change in the, it was just the establishment, I mean, government introduced the levy into mobile transactions. So people did demonstrations and protests and everything, and the government, of course, made some changes to that. Just online, e-protesting, e-demonstrations, e-democracy, this is what is done. And so basically, whenever you want to empower young people in Tanzania to make them participate in in the political issues and all those issues, you should consider doing it online. It is the very easiest way for them to engage and to participate into that thing than taking them into streets and demonstrating for anything. And that's what we are doing now. Now, just coming to my organization, Jamii Forums. Jamii Forums, being an NGO, and we also have the platform for the people to share their ideas, to participate into democratic processes, to engage with the state actors, to share their ideas, and even to just do the digital demonstration and digital protests. And we have different ways of engaging these people, young people, especially because they are the ones who have a lot of smartphones compared to the senior citizens. So that's basically what we are doing. And we have this, we have the program of citizen participation. We engage citizens to participate into these political activities, and I mean to promote good governance and all these issues through the just citizen participation. So we have different projects. That's one which we provide the space, and the different thing that we are doing is the laws and regulation in Tanzania are somehow they somehow strict the ability for the young people to engage into politics. You can face some consequences. And most young people say, like, I don't want to get into trouble. So you cannot just go to Twitter, I mean, Facebook or somewhere and post your things, because if you be caught somewhere, you may be into trouble. We have the Cyber Crimes Act, which you may be taken to court for some of the problems that you did online, and you may face some consequences, which many people do not want to do that, do not want even to get into trouble for that thing. So what basically they do is they really care for the privacy. And what we do is we are providing the privacy as we allow these people to stay online while not using their real names. So the platform, this is Jamii Forums. The platform itself, you can register, you just use any name of your choice, not necessarily a name that is tells who you are. You can just choose anything to call. So I may be there, I may call myself maybe a Spartan if I wish, if I want to consider myself to be seen as a Spartan, or any name that I can think of. For example, yeah, for example, this guy, Portfolio. This is not just a made-up name. And we collect nothing from the customers, our clients. We don't correct anything, just their email address for resetting their passwords whenever they forget any. And we provide now the space for them to come and discuss these political issues. And we do have more than 40 different forums in this forum. So you can see Jukwaa Siasa. Siasa means politics. This is why it has that thing of Tanzania's political forum. That's in Swahili, we call it Jukwaa Siasa. This week, you can find all issues about politics which are going on in my country. And you cannot know, if somebody chooses to to share their identities, it is fine if somebody is willing to do that, but most of the people who are sharing their ideas there are not known. On top of that, we have another, this Stories of Change forum. This is Stories of Change. I need to stand up, please. This is Stories of Change. It started just in 2021. We started this as an initiative to promote the e-democracy. There are so many people out there with very good ideas, but they don't have a space to share their ideas. There are so many things that they are not, they don't agree with. They don't have a space to say. So we started these Stories of Change for these people to come and share their ideas. But what is unique about Stories of Change is we judge some of the stories and give some money. Well, it's a prize, actually. It is just an annual competition of writing something that is suggesting some changes. You should say that what the problem is, and you say what you think are the solutions to it. So, and we have a very good impact from this forum. When we are giving prizes to the winners, we are always inviting these state actors to come with us and to congratulate these young people. And in most cases, the young people are the ones who are becoming winners, which says they always have a lot of things to say, but they don't have a specific forum to say. So we are providing that space for them to come and say and do whatever that they want. If they want to be anonymous, they can stay anonymous and share their ideas. It is for this reason, Jamii Forums is taken to be, of course, some years back, it was taken to be like anti-government kind of platform, because they are providing these critical issues to the government. But now, you can find those Cybercrimes Act, the Statistics Act, and some of the acts that have been enacted some years back. Some of the studies do suggest they are Jamii Forums law, saying that they were just laws and regulations specifically to limit the powers of Jamii Forums. But we managed that. We managed that, and we're still moving. So the issue of digital, when we started, Jamii Forums, when it started, provided a very big space for these young people to share their ideas. Now, what the government did is to come now with those laws and everything like Cybercrimes Act and everything, which also do limit. For example, we are now needed to, one of the, I think the Cybercrimes Act, which wanted service providers to know everything about the customers, those who are subscribing to it. And we know nothing about our customers. We don't want to know anything because we want to give them privacy. We want to give them the anonymity, which is something that they can make them free to share their ideas. So that's basically what we are doing, just to make sure that they are getting into these issues. And we have other programs of going, we can say, offline engagements, going to the young people, talking to them about the democracy. Why should they engage into this? Why should they be part of democratic processes? Why should they be engaging in these governance and issues? So from that, we have these mentorship programs for the young people to be into governance and everything like that. Like in 2022, we traveled. In 2022, we were working with, in collaboration with the Tanzanian Center for Democracy, and we mentored a lot of young people who in those youth wings of those political parties. So we collected all of them and talked to them about the politics and how can they stay relevant and how can they navigate in this world of ours, which is dominated by the senior citizens who sometimes do think everything should be traditional. And some of them do even think like digital is something which is very bad for the governance. It is something I know a lot of governments do think that way, like digital should be limited because it is, of course, you can see a lot of studies have proved that the more digitalized the country is, the more accountability and governance is improving. So it is like these people do not want to be improved, do not want to improve the governance, do not want to be accountable. This is why the digital is limited, the digital space is limited. The cases that happened in Uganda, for example, restricting the internet during the general election happened in Tanzania in 2020. Internet was restricted. I mean, some of the services like WhatsApp could not be accessible, Facebook and all those. These are the platforms, including the forums, because these are the platforms which these young people to share their ideas openly. And we see this problem like this. The state actors do not see how can we leverage the technology to make young people participate into the democratic processes. For example, the issues of voting. For the 2020, there were 35 million people who registered to vote. Of course, a lot of them were just young people. But by that time, most people were registering for voting because the voter's ID was not just a voter's ID. It could take you to, it guarantees you to get some other services. So most people wanted that for other services, government services, not necessarily to vote. And you see the numbers of they have registered to vote, but the voters, I mean, the people who are voting, the number that shows the people who are voting is very low. Why? Because the young people, the unemployment for the young people, you can see, I mean, like what I've shared, it's really huge. So it's not, you cannot just be in a place to vote. That station that you have registered to vote, you cannot be there sometimes. So maybe some other places and just voting just one day. And we are promoting that it should be a digital kind of thing. So somebody can vote anywhere he is or she is. Wherever you are, you can just vote. As long as you are registered, you are known, and everything can be done digitally because these people cannot stay at one place. And sometimes the queues and all those issues, the young people do not have time for that. Whenever you find young people do participate into politics, it's when they are promised to have some money, the Boda guys. So if you give them some money and fill the motorcycle tanks, they will just come and demonstrate and say like, this is our president, this is our somebody, this is our somebody. They will just go to places and say all those words. But when it comes to voting, you won't find them there. It's only when you give them money to tell that you are good, they will just do that. Just imagine if somebody is contesting for a seat. You just need some people to say like you're good, and you know it's just the young people who are the good population that can support you, and that's what they are always doing. So what we do in Yamini forums is also to make these people informed and make informed decisions. Making informed decisions. Need an informed citizen who is going to make informed decisions when it comes to governance and democracy and all those issues. And we are doing that, and we are lucky that most people, even they do come into the platform and say like, I have been in this way because of the content that I've been consuming in the forums. But not only us, of course, there are so many NGOs which are doing good in Tanzania, those which are promoting the youth participation and youth empowerment. In 1995, there were just 3,000 NGOs that are in that youth empowerment. But the statistics of 2024 to show more than 10, it is 11,000 NGOs are working to empower youth to increase their participation into these democratic issues. Now, if I share my experience now, even engaging with them and telling them about the governance and democracy, it was a bit problematic because even to let them come together and to discuss democratic issues was an issue. Most of them do not have even time for that. They are always thinking like, it is not my thing. Of course, it is not my thing. That has been the thing. Like, if you are speaking about governance issues, whenever you're talking about these critical issues, and you're somebody of my age, they say like, are you now getting old? Because it is just for it is the mindset that we are also fighting against. Last year we had this project of Civic na Siasa in Jamii Forums. Civic na Siasa is I am not a political guy. I'm not concerned with politics. That project was specifically to go against this mindset of like politics is not my thing, because of course politics is everything. It decides on a lot of things that are affecting the daily lives of the people, and the lives includes everybody. I mean, including the young people and all those people. So if you say like it is not my thing, automatically you let the people in power abuse, if not misusing and doing all of those issues. So basically, there are these things that we are addressing, including that mindset of like politics is just for the senior citizens, not the young people. We are addressing that, and we are good now. You can see now, even since the establishment, the emergence of Jamii Forums, you can see a lot of young people now are getting into politics. They have those power to contest for different positions, political positions. And we, through these mentorship programs also, they are now getting the courage of getting involved into those issues. And we are proud to have some of the people who are now on some of the very good political positions as the product of Jamii Forums. Because one thing is, when it comes to income and all those issues, obvious, young people do not have enough income for them to contest for some of the political positions. So it is just through this kind of information sharing, they can say like, it's not about money. It's not always about money. You can just go and tell people about whatever that you are going to change and everything, and people will understand you and they will vote for you and you'll be in those positions. It is now coming up. It's not necessarily about money. People will vote for you. And now you can find some people are saying like, if there is anybody coming and give us money to vote for him, we'll take the money, but we vote for whoever is of our choice. Not just somebody who has given us money. So those are the things that are happening. And for the empowerment, the government itself, it has now started to consider the digital issues, although they are just some of the challenges when it comes to digital. The government is still finding digital to be something which is not good for them. And there this is like bureaucratic kind of things when it comes to empowerment. For example, there is youth fund from the government are providing the funds to the young people with any idea to implement, to improve the living standards and everything. But one of my study, I have shown a lot of those funds do not go to the young people. They don't even go to ask for those funds. And if you ask the young people, why don't you go to get those money? They're just like, it takes a long time. You have to apply today and you'll get some money. A lot of months, you will have to wait for a lot of months to get the money. It is boring. So most people, they are depending on these private entities for the empowerment than the government. And this is why, as an economist now, I always suggest like the government should not be giving money to people, should have like a framework that allows the NGOs to function in a way that they can empower people, because these young people are very comfortable with the NGOs than with the government, unless you are part of the government itself. But if you're just an independent person, you cannot be comfortable working with the government. So I would wish to share some of the stories here. You know, listen to this story of Piri. Wow. Wow. I realize there are a lot of stories here. And another thing that we have now, this is not just for you see the categories of the platforms we have, general forums, sports, and everything, and we have the Future Wolf right there. Future Wolf is a whistleblowing platform which gives these people to provide, to give anything that they find like wrongdoings in their places, and it is completely anonymous. Even the ID, the name that you're using won't show up if you're using that. It is one of the issues that has brought a very good impact for this year, from the year that we established it. A lot of young people do share the information about wrongdoings in their places, and the government is now taking actions. And it takes almost 2 to 3 days for the government to respond to whatever that is raised in this platform. We are that impactful. So even the young people, whenever they find like there is, there's this democratic process of proposing a bill, sending it to the parliament, and they discuss the bill, and it goes. If it is a levy or some taxes or anything, to go through these processes. But the thing is, the members of parliament, of course, this is the global problem. The trust has gone down. Most people do not trust these members of parliament, so they have to speak for themselves. This is why a lot of bills which are going to, which are sent to the member to the parliament, they are not rejected. They will automatically become laws, and it is just the young people who are affected. So to counter that, of course, when it is happening, you will be invited to go there and to discuss all those issues and everything. But when you go there to discuss, it is like, it's just a formalization. Like we call the stakeholders and we discuss with them. But basically nothing is going to happen. So it's just online platforms that are making changes instead of the members of parliament who are expected to speak for the people. Nowadays, it's not about the members of parliament speaking for the people. It is the people speaking for themselves using the digital platforms. This is what is there. And the issue now, if you want a young person to get into these governance issues, the issue of freedom of expression is something which is very crucial. Jeffrey knows about Tanzania and how we are when it comes to express ourselves. It is, even if you are conducting a survey, we won't express that much unless you guarantee somebody the privacy, the anonymity, then you can see who are the Tanzanians to speak their mind. But if the anonymity is not guaranteed, you will find nothing. Because we used to be in that environment which restricts the freedom of expression. When we are speaking of the freedom of expression, the Media Services Act is one of the Media Services Act, Cybercrimes Act, Statistics Act. These are some of the laws and regulations in my country which restrict the freedom of expression, and they have seen a lot of people who are facing problems just because of that. I should end there. Oh, okay. Should that be used for the questions? All the questions we can.
Yeah, so if there are any data, we're gonna have 10 questions at the end after after Dr. Chacha.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Give me chip in. I may stop sharing.
All right. Okay, thank you so much, Francis.
Abby, you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry. All right. So when it comes to youth involvement and political governance, I also want to hear how the Tanzanian youth, especially, are keeping the government in check. Because when you think of that, when you talk of that, especially when it comes to the Kenyans, Kenyans have made a name for themselves. Kenyans, they will protest online and offline. They will go to parliament in person. Like last year, I think it made world news. Kenyans, they stormed the parliament because the government was bent on passing a finance bill that was going to make things worse. And Kenyans literally, the Kenyan Gen Zs, so this is basically, I'd say 28 and to maybe 20 to 28 around there, they stormed the parliament and they made sure that that bill was not passed. I mean, they passed the bill, but it had to be withdrawn because things just boiled over really, really quickly. And so, Kenyans, and recently there was, I think they're supposed to be like the Dutch government officials, I think the president, no, they have a king, right? He's supposed to come to Kenya for a state visit. And Kenyans, they went and wrote emails telling him not to come because the president is very corrupt, right? And so Kenyans, they are basically the Gen Zs, they are the spirit of activism in Kenya. And they basically, they keep the government in check. They make sure that, these leaders are not just doing whatever they want with, with the taxpayer money, right? And so that's what Dr. Chicha is going to be telling us about. So Dr. Chicha, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right, so I'm going to be setting you up next. So just to tell us about youth involvement in political governance in Kenya and how things look like, because we are not in Kenya, but I am Kenyan. So maybe I'm a bit biased, but there's nobody who protests like the way Kenyans do. So we would like to hear about how things are, how the youth are protesting in Kenya, how they're basically involving themselves in political governance. And then we'll have time for questions at the end.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here again. I think I've been there physically, so it's a good moment for me again to have a privilege to talk to you. I think there's a clip I want us to first play so that we can actually be within the context of what is happening with the Gen Z before I proceed.
Yeah, I don't think we need to be talking about Raila.
But let me say something about that.
No.
I will say something about that. Wanjira, you will be disciplined on this show. So that
I am very disciplined. It is you bringing Raila into this conversation.
So let me say this about Raila.
He betrayed us.
Okay, hold on. Wanjira, do you feel betrayed?
Yeah, absolutely. We were not on the streets for ODM to get positions. We were on the streets to get good governance in this country. And had Raila joined us, we would be having a very different conversation right now. So we cannot start bringing him here and talking about how he was not respected. I don't know what all of that history, honestly, was rubbished the day he betrayed the Gen Z movement. History will not absolve him. That happened when he was fighting Moi and whatnot, but when the people needed him, he turned his back on the people. There's no forgetting that. And also, when you talk about discipline from the young people, I think the Gen Zs have been absolutely disciplined in defending the dignity of the Kenyan people. That is the discipline we need to talk about. They have absolutely fought to the nail that the Constitution of Kenya is respected and upheld, that human rights are respected and upheld, that the Constitution is what dictates the politics of the country. And when Farah Malim comes and say, I'm going to kill 5,000 Gen Zs, when somebody says, if you give me 3 days, all of that happens, and then we want to look at the indiscipline of the people. What about the indiscipline of the oppressors? Who really should be talking about indiscipline from the other? And we are tired of even being labeled, our children, they don't respect our elders. where we come from, elders earn respect. I respect you because you are respectful and you deserve my respect. You've heard what people say, that even fools grow old. We have been seeing a lot of old fools in the political space. And then they are saying you have no manners. Even I remember at the airport when I was asking Faramalim if he's still killing 5,000 Gen Zs.
You asked him?
I asked him, I was like, yes.
And?
He said, oh, it wasn't me. He tried to, and then he told me, you know, Anjura, you're like my granddaughter. And said, why are we bringing ages in politics when you wanted to kill us for raising a valid question? Honestly, Jeff, what people were saying is we reject the finance bill. And how that ended was in young people being dumped, was in women being dismembered and dumped in Kware, in Mukuru, was in a very dark phase. Came through the country because we said we reject the finance bill. This is outrageous. And today we are talking about young people are indisciplined. I refuse to have that notion about indiscipline because it is not right. And it is weaponizing morals to entrench a hegemony and a dictatorship that is unacceptable.
Just to come in on that.
Right. Thank you very much. I think that gives us a mood of the position of the Gen Zs at the moment, and at least some of the trajectories that are experienced at this particular moment. For the people that perhaps are outside Kenya, many people always think that this age group belongs to a particular category of a mass movement or a revolutionary movement and so on. Actually has nothing to do with that. So the best thing is exactly what we are trying to do, to be able to discuss this particular entity and put it within the context of academia so that people can be able to understand it in a better way. Now, this theme of Gen Zs has been a subject of intense academic discussions. And one of the latest is the work of Tiambe Seleza. I think he's an American professor from Cameroon. He has been able to unpack some of the historical facts about the Gen Z revolution and how they came in within the context of the periodization of Kenyan history. But for me here, what I'm going to do is to be able to ask one question, or rather answer one question on what's going to happen to the Gen Zs after being silenced for almost half a year, and what are some of the prospects for the development of the similar thought in the post Ruto or post before elections that will take place in the next few years. But first, I would like to begin briefly with a historical background of Kenya in the context of political developments. Now, we see very clearly that at the end of Cold War in 1990s, Kenya has become a subject of intense media coverage across the world. This is not because maybe perhaps Kenya has a strategic position for Western powers, or because Kenya has the best or world-class athletes, or because Kenya hosts, for instance, UN agencies, of which critical ones are based in Nairobi, or because we produce the best tea or coffee, or perhaps because we have a very huge Kenyans living in diaspora and so on. But because Kenya has a huge population, quite dynamic population, energized and politically awake population. And this is seen in the way in which political activism or political contestation is being felt in Kenya over these years, especially after post end of Cold War and beyond. You can actually see some of these effects of this particularly energized, politically energized group of people, especially when we have our elections after every 5 years. You can actually see that Kenya becomes a subject of intense media coverage across the world. One of those reasons why this happens is because of many factors, which I might continue to mention as we continue looking at this. First is the 2010 Constitution, which was a very progressive constitution that Kenya adopted in 2010. And this constitution has come to be understood only very recently, especially by the young people, especially the Gen Zs who have been reading it online. And number two, perhaps because of the demystifying the concept of the presidency as a public sphere. Once this has been demystified, because the previous imperial presidency was completely a different phenomena as opposed to this one. The presidency in Kenya today is looked at in the context of service, in the context that Kenyans have a right to be able to question the presidency and whatever happens within that particular context. And then the third one is about the significance of social media in social and political mobilization. Now, for the Gen Z to take place in June last year, it makes three different shifts that continue to remain and will continue to remain permanent. I know many Kenyans may agree or disagree with me, but these three consequences of this movement has completely been altered, and they will remain forever. For one, it was a shift from old to new political dispensation in Kenya. That means from old generation to the new generations. So that Kenyan political sphere had been dominated by the old guards, and the youth had always been told that, your leadership is in the future, you will grow up and you become leaders. So that is shift on the first level. The second level is a shift from ethnic-based politics to issue-based politics. That will not change. The first one will not change. The second one will not change. And finally, this particular revolution, if I might call it, may have an interesting phenomena, especially having a sort of a political domino effect to East African countries. As we have heard from my previous presenter, we can actually see that there is a quite kind of diffusion of political ideas that are cutting across Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, even beyond. So what we are seeing today might have a completely permanent effect in the next few years. So as we examine this particular movement, if I might call it like that, they call themselves leaderless, partyless, jobless, and so on and so forth. When they erupted went into the streets on 25th of June against a financial bill, they proposed, they made significant changes that completely almost stopped the government from operation. And that was very critical. So that these taxes, for those Kenyans who might not be able to understand, for the first time, this youth had been completely immersed into silence and looking at the government and trying to participate in it without actively participating in it, until when taxes began touching their daily lives, because most of them were beginning to invest on online businesses and so on. And then the government touched on an issue of taxing them and so on. That is how it happened. Secondly, it was a rebellion against a public display of arrogance, extravagance, and so on, which had been a particular everyday activities by political figures trying to show off wealth and so on. It was a rejection of the corrupt and populist regime of William Ruto, and extravagant behavior and lifestyle of the Kenyan president at that particular time. And this could be seen when the president visited the US, and the young people monitored his movements. They acquired figures about the amount of money that he had used and so on. It was also a revolt against the 80% youth. Actually, the youth constitute 80% of the Kenyan population, who are sick and tired of the promises that had been given to them by successive regimes, of course, many other regimes, not only Ruto regime and so on. It was also a revenge of angry and betrayed youth who were cynically mobilized by Ruto and promised so many jobs, of which they could not see any. It was a rebellion launched not only led by regular cynical politicians, but by the youth who could not be easily be isolated, who could not be intimidated, who could not be bought, who could not be bribed, or who could not be co-opted. Of course, historically, we have known that our Kenyan political figures can always be bought, or they can always be moved, they can be co-opted, and so on and so forth. This can be seen even in the present dispensation that is going on in political sphere in this country. So it was a rebellion that was launched to ensure that politics of tribalism that had dominated Kenyan political sphere, and those politics of divide and rule were over. And that particular moment marked the period, the end of that particular aspect. It was a rejection of the new neoliberal intervention into Kenyan politics or into the Kenyan economy. IMF, USA, UK, and many other countries that were meddling their affairs into Kenya, and so on. So what was the background of this? Why is it that we had, for the first time, we have the eruption of the youth in Kenyan political sphere? That has never happened before in Kenyan history. First and foremost, is because of the expansion of the education system that began around 2000 and beyond. You know, there was a number of students had been registered in many universities. Actually, Kenya has 49 universities at the moment. That's a huge number. Every year, we have about 150 plus thousand students graduating from Kenyan universities. So liberalization of university education provided critical education for these Gen Zs and so on and so forth. And then, of course, this empowering them and fostering a sense of empowerment among the youth. The 2010 constitution, which we normally say that the 2010 constitution in Kenya was a very angry constitution, because this constitution was actually hijacked by the civil society. The government had very little participation in this constitution. And when it was enacted, very few Kenyans actually had known the content of this particular constitution. The constitution gives a lot of rights for the young people and everybody else, especially on the Bill of Rights. And of course, the youth have come to discover about some of the secret things about this constitution that has encouraged them to engage in local politics and demand accountability as well. So this was a very critical document that must have affected the development of this particular movement. Then social media, since 1990s, of course, there's increasing use of social media, and of course, increasing widening space, political space, where the youth are engaging in organizing, mobilizing, and amplifying the youth voices, especially using Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and so many other platforms that has made it easier for the youth to engage in political mobilization. So then we have also viral campaigns that have been going on for change, Youth for Change, and many others, Stop Abduction, and so on and so forth, that has been going on in Kenya. And then, of course, you know, the the presidential character, if I might call it, the false promises that the president gave before, the promises of elections, and Kenyans elected him on a credo of a hustler narrative that tended to actually capture the imaginations of the youth who massively voted for him. And of course, this did not happen. Apart from that, of course, we have a background of COVID pandemic, which completely kept the youth off employment. It brought about a lot of inequalities that the youth began to question about employment, lack of government support, and so on. And therefore, the formation of the concept of the Gen Zs began to mobilize around that time, that quiet time, and so on, where education was disrupted, economic activities were became slow, and so on, and the youth began to gather around there and, of course, mobilize themselves and so on. Of course, the continued rise of digital spaces made it possible for the youth to continue engaging even further. Now, lastly, we had, of course, in the regional influence of Kenyan politics, especially from West Africa. A young Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso coming into the images in Kenyan popular sphere, in Kenyan social media, and so on, displayed as a young leader who is exercising the rule of law, and so on. So there is this comparative analysis of this young man, was looking at the old generation and how they have plunged this country into a lot of debts and so on and so forth. Then the youth in Kenya began to get mobilized along that influence of the 34-year-old Burkina Faso leader, Ibrahim Traore, and so on. So there are these many other factors that made it possible for the rise of these particular Gen Zs. And of course, we have said that what made it happen was on 25th of June was the financial bill that had proposed some of the very difficult taxing measures that were going to affect the youth. And of course, that became the point in which this happened. So what happened after 25th of June was the government used a lot of force against this youth. The police used brutality, killings, and disappearances, abductions, and various methods in order to quell the problem that had been posed by these young people. And therefore, others were imprisoned, and spreading of fear by the government, intimidation of the young people, suppression of freedom from the young people, and so on. And of course, lately now was the increasing episodes of abduction of the young people, and some of them disappearing, and of course being killed, and so on. And therefore, what has been happening is the fact that you can actually see that there is some quietness. There are many people, spectators especially, who are not within the country, could be able to safely conclude that the Gen Zs have been silenced forever. But what happened is that while the Kenyan government did not positively respond to the issues that were raised by the Gen Zs, of course, what happened is that there was the cabinet was dissolved and several changes took place and so on. But the president was buying time so that he can make his own changes. And by doing so, he co-opted the opposition leader, Raila Odinga, so that Raila could save him from the vagaries of the young people, the Gen Zs. So the problem had not been solved. And that is why I'm saying that the government of Kenya is sitting on a volcano. And that volcano will erupt, possibly because of several factors that might see that. Number one is the impending bill, 2025 financial bill, which is again proposed to add more tougher measures to the Kenyan economy, and of course going to affect the youth even more. Secondly, is the inability of the government to constitute IEBC, an electoral body that will oversee an election. And therefore, most Gen Zs are looking at this as in a very mischievous way, that the government is trying to buy time so that there will be no elections at all. And therefore, what may happen is the fact that there is a possibility of a popular uprising and even a popular a possible formation of a political party based on the young people, or a social movement, or increased violence that might, in the next few days, that will see the government beginning to lose what we call legitimacy. And of course, what is happening today now is the fact that the government has not been able to constitute itself within its own political party, that the government formed upon elections, and therefore co-opting other political parties, different players from different political dispensations, and making the government extremely shaky government. And therefore, there is a lot of questions about political legitimacy of Ruto's presidency. First and foremost, there is a lot of skepticism and disputes from large population of people who believe that, the president had won an election on the basis of hustler economy or bottom-up economic model and so on, which has not been seen. And therefore, that makes the issue of political legitimacy become a questionable issue in Ruto's administration. Now, when we think about legitimacy theory, how it explains the tension that occur and the gaps that continue to widen between the people or the governed and the government. And so we tend to see a lot of tensions that are developing between these. And of course, the youth and the Gen Zs are making the whole thing to become extremely complicated. And therefore, what we may experience in a few years to come, not even years to come, some few months to come, is an explosion of the youth that might go uncontrollably wide, and that may cause a lot of disruption in Kenyan political sphere. And therefore, to me, that is how I can be able to explain that phenomena. And I would like to invite my friend, Dr. Wahome, just for 2 minutes to make a rejoinder of what we have been able to discuss. And then after that, we can be able to continue. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Chacha. Dr. Wahome, are you here? I'm trying to find you on the chat.
Dr. Wahome he was my discussant. He was supposed to to rejoin for 3 minutes.
I don't see.
Perhaps he's going to join in, so we can just proceed.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe we can just have a chat then. So just speaking of sorry, let me just. Right. So so just speaking of, Kenyan Gen Zs, I mean, and for you to just understand why Kenyans, young people are trying to sort of keep the government in check. So the Kenyan president was actually ranked the second most corrupt president in the world. I kid you not. And the other president, the guy who was first was, the president of Syria, Assad, the guy who fled to Russia, right? So that's how bad of a president he is, right? That's how corrupt he is. And so even as things, are boiling over, you see a guy who's very almost emboldened with the protest. He feels like he's untouchable almost, and he's even swearing to make sure that he's gonna be the president again come the next election, right? Despite being probably one of the most unpopular people in the world right now. So that is basically a disaster waiting to happen, because I mean, Kenyans, you remember 2007, they had an election that was stolen and it ended in the post-election violence and people died like you have never seen. And so that is basically what is boiling over right now. And so, I also know that there are Dr. Choti's students in the chat. So if you have questions, this is your time to shine. So feel free to ask questions if you have them. And so, so this is the discussion that we are trying to we are trying to have about, you know, how are the youth making sure that they're keeping their leaders in check, right? And how and why is that very important? And not just Kenyans, it is everywhere, right? I mean, there's a new administration in the US. How are you going to make sure that what you voted for is what you're getting, right? And so, sorry, Dr. Chacha, the students joined the meeting at 4 p.m. Oh, all right. Okay, Dr. Choti, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks so much, Abby, and thanks so much, Dr. Chacha, for your talk. The plan was my students who had a class 4 to 6, they would join this event at around 4 or 5 minutes past 4. I see most of them arrived around 4, and even me, when I joined after another class, I found you speaking. So I was wondering if you don't mind, you can give the topic what you were talking about, provide key points and like an overview, and then from there maybe we can ask a few questions to fill this group in.
Okay, so I think that's I'll just, but maybe for the sake of your students, I was talking about sitting on a volcano, trying to look at aftermath of the Gen Z's eruption in Kenya. So what I was trying to say is that what happened on 25th of June last year will have 3 permanent effects. Number one, say that it will change completely the face of Kenyan politics. So from the political sphere being controlled by the old generation to the new generation. I think so many Kenyans, of course, who have issues may contest this, but I think this is what might happen. And then, secondly, it will shift again from ethnic based to issue based, because when the Gen Zs talk about their tribeless, they are partyless, and so on. This is gonna be a major change in Kenyan politics. And the third one, which is inevitable, is the fact that this movement will have a domino effect to the region, not only in East Africa, but to the rest of Africa, because of the increased kind of hybridization of ideas within the continent, and so on and so forth. So I tried also to quickly to see at some of the issues that these Gen Zs were demonstrating or protesting against. Of course, we began by the financial bill of that proposed increased taxation. We talked about rebelling against the extravagance that had been displayed by the political class, ministers and so on, permanent secretaries who are trying to display opulence and so on. It was also a rejection of corruption and extravagance regime of President Ruto as a person. And also we talked about they were angry because they had been betrayed by the president who had promised them by using the credo of hustler, providing jobs, and so on and so forth. It was also a display of displeasure on the kind of politics of tribalism that had dominated Kenya for over 40 years or 50 years since independence. And therefore, the young people wanted a shift of Kenyan politics into issue-based politics, which they actually displaced when they were talking about their tribeless, partyless, and so on and so forth. So that's what I was trying to look at. And then I looked at the underlying factors that made it possible for this political activism of Gen Zs to rise up. We talked about the education system that began during the Kibaki era in the year 2000, 2003, expansion of the university education. We also looked at our constitution, the 2010 constitution, which actually is the third most progressive constitution in Africa. I don't know whether it is in Africa or on Earth, but I think it has been praised as one of the most progressive constitution. And sometimes I normally call it an angry constitution because it was given to Kenyans so that they might not go back to war again, and so on. So then social media becoming a platform upon which the young people are able to engage either in Twitter or TikTok, Instagram, challenging political leadership, especially at the moment. I just played a video clip a few minutes ago that shows the status of the Gen Zs at the moment and how they are trying to get hold of government into to be able to be accountable and so on. And therefore, of course, we talked about the COVID vagaries that it brought about, unemployment and so on and so forth. And finally, we looked at the regional influence in West Africa, for example, a young 35-year-old Burkina Faso leader, Ibrahim Traore's influence to our young people, how his videos have been going viral, showing how he has practiced leadership and governance in a very interesting way that has moved the youth to engage in and therefore engage in this. And therefore, towards the end, we tended to think about the concept of political legitimacy. The reason why the president or the Kenyan government is applying a lot of force on young people is because of the legitimacy. Because of course there is the questioning of the validity of William Ruto's presidency, because he's dissolved his own political party and co-opted other political parties. He failing to fulfill his promises and so on and so forth puts his political or his political party under very shaky foundation within the ethnography of Kenyan politics, and therefore making it possible for a weakened political legitimacy for him. So basically, that's what we talked about, plus many other issues.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Chacha. For the sake of my students as well, also, I want to give us maybe some background information. I'm sure they could be having questions, and I also have a few questions for you. Class, Kenya is a former colony of Britain, and Kenya gained independence in 1963. I think the colony was established in around 1900 or between 1890 and 1900. And it was one of those colonies, I think, where Europeans went to settle. They didn't know that they were going to depart, but because of the rebellious wars, liberation wars, which Kenyans mounted on the British, eventually Kenya became independent, politically independent in 1963, end of 1963. So the first president of Kenya's name was Jomo Kenyatta. He ruled between 1964, when he became prime minister, later president, until 1978. He died in office, and I think he was around 85 years old, if I remember correctly. He was succeeded by his vice president then, Daniel Arap Moi. Kenyatta was really, in my own judgment or perspective, Kenyatta was very, very tribal. And I remember when I read about his first cabinet, there was no woman member of the cabinet, and most of the members of his cabinet came from one region in Kenya. He was succeeded by Daniel Arap Moi, who came from a different part of Kenya. The first president came from central Kenya, a community called the Kikuyu, and the second president, Moi, came from the Kalenjin group, who are from western part, western part of the country. He ruled for 24 years. He was a dictator. That's when I was in school, high school. I know we protested a lot. Moi, eventually Kenyans had to protest in the 90s. Kenya was ruled as a one-party democracy, they call it, from independence to the late 90s. So Kenyans were tired of one-party dictatorial leadership, and then there were demonstrations. There were people agitating for multi-party democracy. Chacha can confirm the dates, but Kenya became a multi-party democracy, I think late or early 90s. And so we
1982.
done it. When was that, Chacha?
De jure, I think the 1982 when we adopted 1992 when we
1992.
adopted
And so
multi-party democracy.
with the new political arrangement, Moi were to run again for the presidents twice, 2 terms maximum, 5 years. The president rules for occupies the presidency for 5 years, and then 1 term is ends. Then there was a maximum of 2 terms. I think he won. I don't know. He really won 2 more terms, and I think after he couldn't run the 3rd term, we had a 3rd president who came from the same community of the 1st president, Jomo Kenyatta. So his name was Mwai Kibaki. Kibaki ruled for 2 terms, and he was succeeded by Uhuru Kenyatta, the son of the 1st president, also from the Kikuyu ethnic group of Central Kenya. He ruled. He was president for 2 terms of a total of 10 years, and he was succeeded by the current president, who's William Ruto, who comes from the community of the 2nd president of Kenya, Daniel Moi. And so maybe you could ask, why are we having Kenya being ruled by people from 2 communities? You can guess. The Kikuyu, where the 1st president came from, and of course his son, who is the 4th president, they come from the most populous community in Kenya, the Kikuyu. And then the 2nd president comes from the Kalenjin community. And now the current president is from the Kalenjin community. These are the top, like the most populous groups in Kenya. In other words, the democracy, the way it's practiced in Kenya, it's more like census, really. If we have 2, 3 populous ethnic groups coming together, form a party, and they feed one candidate, they're likely to win. So smaller communities like where I come from, they will never the case is like they might never be raised a president. I have a stronger candidate can be from those regions. It's a question of how big is your community, your ethnic group, or which ethnic group are you associated with. So the current president has been in office since 2022. It's his 1st term. And then last year in June, we had the Gen Z population demonstrating and like raising a lot of heat against his presidency because of the finance bill which his government had created, which was the Gen Z thought was against the general trend in Kenya. The economy there's inflation, and they thought it's not good. In fact, I was in Kenya when these demonstrations were taking place in a Western Kenya place called Kisii. I remember one of the days the demonstration was taking place, I was in the city center of Kisii, and I was driving back home in the evening, and we were stopped somewhere in between. As we came out of the CBD of the city, we were like, no, you have to give money before you can go through this barrier. And of course, I told the young people I didn't have money, and they were kind enough. I thought like, now I'm going to be a victim of this demonstration. After around 5 minutes, they say this one doesn't have money, let him go. But some people who had the money, I didn't have cash. I had some money in my phone in terms of mobile account, but I didn't have really cash to give them. Now, question, come to you, Chacha. To what extent did the Gen Z demonstrations or protests succeed? How did they succeed? To what extent?
Well, I think the very many Kenyans normally underestimate the achievement that these young people did. And I actually summarized them. The first one I've just said that they shook the government's legitimacy and questioned the government. That's why the president managed to make a lot of changes within the government so that to appease this youth that he has actually made something on. Of course, on the other hand, he was trying to play around with their psychology so that they could see that he was actually serious when he was not. I think you have seen in the clip that I have played there, there's a narrative that, it is because of the failure of parents that these young people are quite indisciplined. And that's what is being paraded around, that kind of argument. But that's actually not true. The changes, the Kenyan politics will never be the same again. Even if anybody who is going to be given public office will be extremely careful in future. So we'll have a lot of accountability in the public sphere, is serving people and so on. And of course, again, another change that these Gen Zs have made is the fact that the presidency as a public sphere has been now brought to the fore as under intense scrutiny. For the first time, the presidency of Kenya is being debated, discussed, and so on, cajoled in a way that has never happened in Kenyan history. And therefore, that also demystifies this talk about the imperial presidency and so on. And therefore, they have achieved a lot, of course, in terms of opening and widening up our space. And of course, again, being able to help us to be able to understand more deeper the contents of our 2010 constitution.
Chacha, what was the clip about? Can we watch it, and how long is it?
Yeah, sorry.
Well,
Sorry. Yeah, I'm gonna have Damaris just replay the clip just so we have a bit of context.
Okay.
Damaris, if you're able to play the clip. All right, there you go.
Yeah, I don't think we need to be talking about Raila.
But let me say something about that.
No.
I will say something about that. Wanjira, you will be disciplined on this show. So that
I am very disciplined. It is you bringing Raila into this conversation.
So let me say this about Raila.
He betrayed us.
Okay, hold on. Wanjira, do you feel betrayed?
Yeah, absolutely. We were not on the streets for ODM to get positions. We were on the streets to get good governance in this country. And had Raila joined us, we would be having a very different conversation right now. So we cannot start bringing him here and talking about how he was not respected. I don't know what all of that history, honestly, was rubbished the day he betrayed the Gen Z movement. History will not absolve him. That happened when he was fighting Moi and whatnot, but when the people needed him, he turned his back on the people. There's no forgetting that. And also, when you talk about discipline from the young people, I think the Gen Zs have been absolutely disciplined in defending the dignity of the Kenyan people. That is the discipline we need to talk about. They have absolutely fought tooth and nail that the Constitution of Kenya is respected and upheld, that human rights are respected and upheld, that the Constitution is what dictates the politics of the country. And when Farah Maalim comes and say, I'm going to kill 5,000 Gen Zs, when somebody says, if you give me 3 days, I'm gonna, all of that happens, and then we want to look at the indiscipline of the people. What about the indiscipline of the oppressors? Who really should be talking about indiscipline from the other? And we are tired of even being labeled, oh, our children, they don't respect our elders. Where we come from, elders earn respect. I respect you because you are respectful and you deserve my respect. You've heard what people say, that even fools grow old. We have been seeing a lot of old fools in the political space. And then they are saying, you have no manners. Even, I remember at the airport when I was asking Farah Maalim if he's still killing 5,000 Gen Zs.
You asked him?
I asked him, I was like, yes.
And?
He said, oh, it wasn't me. he tried to, and then he told me, you know, Wanjira, you're like my granddaughter. And said, why are we bringing ages in politics when you wanted to kill us for raising a valid question? Honestly, Jeff, what people were saying is we reject the finance bill. And how that ended was in young people being dumped, was in women being dismembered and dumped in Kware, in Mukuru, was in a very dark face, came through the country because we said we reject the finance bill. This is outrageous. And today we are talking about young people are indisciplined. I refuse to have that notion about indiscipline because it is not right. And it is weaponizing morals to entrench a hegemony and a dictatorship that is unacceptable.
Just to come in on the
All right, Dr. Chachi, you can go on.
Thank you so much, Chacha. Now, what I wanted to clarify, Chacha mentioned it for my class, is like, as I said earlier, these demonstrations by the Gen Z youth members is because of the finance bill, which was not acceptable. It was raising taxes and so many other details which were against the common man. And I think there's some sound coming from, I don't know, those who are not muted. And the Chacha said earlier, this movement, the Gen Z movement, was based on issues. It was not tribal because ethnicity in Kenya is very strong. And as I said earlier, if political parties are formed along tribal lines or ethnic lines, and at the end of the day, during elections, communities come together, those with big numbers win an election, which is a big issue about the Kenyan democracy. Now, Chacha, what I was saying, so one of the outcomes of this Gen Z movement in last year is that the heat was too much for the president. He dissolved his cabinet of around, I think, how many members did he have in the cabinet? Chacha, you are muted. Chacha, you are muted. So he dissolved his cabinet and he fired, how many? Okay, Chacha.
Oh, you're talking about the number of cabinet secretaries?
Yes.
I think he sacked almost all of them, and then I
they were
think
around 22.
they made about 6 or so.
Yeah, so the tactic, when he fired some from the old ones, he brought them back some in to the new government. The ones he fired, he replaced them with the members from the opposition, especially the opposition region led by the Raila Odinga, who is a Luo, one of the major communities in Kenya and has been in the opposition for a long time and is respected. That's the individual that lady in the clip was talking about. Don't bring his name here because when he was approached by the president, he was able to agree. And he had around 3 or 4 members of his political party, which is an opposition party, join the ruling party. And that was wrong. And that's actually how the Gen Z movement power was cut. And they were actually neutralized.
Actually, what happened, Dr. Choti, is the fact that the Gen Z movement actually was formed in order to assist the opposition, to assist Raila Odinga to execute his duty, and they actually told him to step aside so that they can do it for him. So actually, the whole movement was seen like it was engineered by or influenced by Raila and so on, which was true. And then, of course, when Raila turned against them to join the president, then it became a betrayal. That's what the lady was talking about.
One of the lessons we learned from the events, these Gen Z generated events in Kenya, is how delicate our democracy is in Africa or Kenya. We don't have really stable political parties. First of all. And then the president is so powerful. Of course, presidents are powerful. Even in America, I think there could be many cases you can cite. So you give the power to one individual. And then once they occupy the position, they can do whatever, and you cannot undo it. And that's also common in Kenya. But what's also worrying is like we don't have like stable political parties. We have so many, more than 20 political parties. And every time during elections, they come together. The person who has more money, more influence, will bring together the major parties, 5 or 4. And if they come from, our membership comes from populous communities, it's like they have won an election altogether. And then people don't fundraise for their candidates. The candidates have to use their own resources. So when they are in power for 5 years, as president, as deputy, as member of the cabinet, as member of parliament, so part of their program is to get to enrich themselves, to fundraise from how, and they are going to use public funds. So there's a lot of corruption in government where individual leaders are going to get money unfairly from the units they run, from the departments, from their political assignments they oversee, so that they can keep that money for 5 years. They know they are going to use the funds to run a strong campaign and they get re-elected. So that's one of the major problems. Unstable political parties, and so many of them, and they make a coalition. Anybody who has more power in terms of money or the name can come together with others and win an election. So they start a real democracy. Now, the other thing that happens after this Gen Z movement late last year is that the president expanded his poaching. After he got into his cabinet members from the political party, then he went and had a meeting with the former president, Uhuru Kenyatta. And then after the meeting, we saw him also firing a few members of his cabinet and bringing in friends of the former president. And this he did a few weeks ago. And then, okay, people are okay with that. What can Kenyans do? Why did he do this? Because he had his deputy president fired, who comes from the populous community of the Kikuyu. And because he wants to appease that community because there are many votes, he went to the former president, who also comes from that community, and through him, he appointed 4 ministers in the cabinet. Some were former in the former government, and so from the same region, so that he's getting ready for the 2027 elections. So you can see it's like somehow put his house in order for an election. And a democratic election, I don't know how democratic that will be if you are selecting people and people will campaign for you from their regions where there are many votes, and then you are also going to be in control of the voting. We haven't even talked about the Electoral Commission, the unit or the organization, a commission which is charged with running the election. It has not been constituted yet, because they are going to agree who to appoint to that commission and things like that. So in short, the Gen Z movement, which began last summer, it's still on. It hasn't come to the fore still. They are facing a lot of challenges because the opposition has really betrayed them, as that young lady was talking about. So that's the situation in Kenya now, and that's the summary we can provide for now. Even maybe you can ask a few questions.
Okay, sorry, I'm just gonna put myself.
I'm done.
Right. Okay. All right. So thank you for highlighting that. So yeah, I think generally Africa has a long way to go. It's not like where you have a very strong democracy where you can disagree with, say, the governor, Gresham, and tell her, I don't like your policies, and you can tell her that to her face. You can essentially tell her, I don't like your policies, that are like this, that are like that, and you will go home and you'll be fine. Nothing will happen to you. But back in Africa, something happened. You say something like that, you will not you'll not be alive the next day. You'll be found somewhere dead. And so and that's why you're seeing a rise in these new younger leaders, like the president of Burkina Faso, right? 36 years old, who actually became president by means of a coup. The guy basically overthrew the government, and he's now like a military president. But you see him sort of putting the interests of his people first, and people actually really like him. He's like one of the most popular guys in Africa right now, right? And so Right. So those are some of the issues we're talking about. And if you have questions, this is your time to ask. Feel free to ask questions if you have questions.
Yeah, we have questions. Maybe Chacha, if you are still available. One of my second question was, we know we are 2 years away from our general election to elect members of parliament, senate, and the president and his running mate. Do you think, to what extent do you think the Gen Z movement from last year is going to influence the elections of 2027?
Yeah, of course, I think I had also addressed that issue. I think what will happen is the fact that the youth factor will be a major influence in the outcome of the next general elections, of the next elections in Kenya. And first and foremost, again, what will happen is that majorly there will be very little ethnic mobilization or political mobilization on the line of ethnicity. But I know in my own assessment, it's going to be issue based kind of politics. And again, there will be a lot of demand for particular leaders that will be, because the youth are the majority, by the way. So people who are going to be elected in the next regime or government will be extremely highly censored. And I think we'll have the NGs have prepared a way that actually will have a better crop of political leadership as opposed to what we have had previously.
Chacha, thank you. A follow-up question could be, what do you think, what do you foresee as the challenges the energy?
Of course, the challenges are the fact they are credo, they're tribeless, leaderless, and so on. You see that the problem, they are young, they have no wealth. When again, in Kenyan politics, it's about money. Most of them have already been bought, and the weaker ones have already been bought and then been positioned in particular political spaces of the corrupt and so on. That might be the most dangerous aspect of it, because if the youth can continue to remain to remain the way they are without being co-opted by any political organization and so on, I think that those are the main challenges that might affect the way they do things. And then another challenge is the fact that they will be denied, those ones who have not registered, they may be denied identification cards so that they are able to qualify to vote. So the moment the government does that, then they know the old crop of voters will continue to do their miracles.
Yes, actually, that's one of the main points I wanted to raise. The government, the government is in charge of even issuing of voter identification documents. And for young people who have just joined the Gen Z, and maybe they didn't have voting cards or national ID, you need a national ID or a passport or to get a voting card. And so you have to begin with the ID. So you have to register in an office, and then you go home and wait for you to be informed when your ID has been processed. You can wait until elections are over. So there is a general kind of perspective, like by political leaders, to make sure that they are not opposed, or if there's a group like the Gen Z is not going to succeed. And one of the best ways of doing that is because they don't have the money, the means of moving around the country, and also there's the age difference too. If it is any Gen Z against the rest of Kenya, they are going to be outnumbered. There's another question on the chat, Chacha. Raymond is asking, how much of the Gen Z movement is informed by revolutionary theory? Are the young people conscious of their action and the consequences thereafter? How much of what they do is proactive?
Yeah,
Abby,
of course.
no. Yeah, that's your question, Chacha. But Abby, sorry, I think this is part of your work, and I just wanted to connect this talk to the student experience. That's all.
Yeah, go ahead. You're good. Yeah.
It's actually a revolution in the making, because if you the presentation from Tanzania actually is the Tanzanians youth are prepared actually for a major kind of it's a revolution in making. If this might happen in Kenya and Tanzania and Uganda, what's happening in Uganda, what's happening in Tanzania, are all the same things that has been happening, that the Gen Zs have been against, and therefore the youth are acutely aware that they want to do a revolution, they want to change things, and so on, and they know the consequences of that. Of that, they know they are going to be arrested and going to be killed and so on. But most of them are determined to get in there, whether they have money or not, whether they are going to die or not, and so on. Majority of them are coming to that level. The moment that happens, where the youth, by the way, the youth have nothing to lose. They have no property to lose, to take care of. They have no children left behind, and so on. Most of the Kenyan political class actually get a lot of wealth. They steal property. They get engaged in corruption to sustain their wealth, to sustain their families, and so on. Of which the Gen Zs are not, don't do that, and therefore they are. I think most of them are acutely aware, personally, that they are in a revolution. And that revolution is actually some inches away from now. Perhaps maybe my reading of Kenyan politics may be contested, but I think that is what's going to happen soon.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So I think, Raymond, I see your hand. All right. So I think it's good to get away from this narrative that, these young people, they're just a bunch of uneducated guys who don't even know what they're protesting about. Because these are people who know exactly what they want. They know exactly what they don't want, especially, and they know why they're out in the streets, demanding for better leadership. And so, yes, these are people who know full well of the consequences of what they are doing. And that's why they say they're tribeless, leaderless, jobless, which means they have nothing to lose. And so, once they head out on the streets, they know exactly what they're doing. It's not like they know I'm going to protest because this is affecting, this is going to make me unable to go to school. My parents are, they're not going to be able to pay for my schooling. Like this guy has the president basically even changed the way people pay for the medical insurance scheme that was there. And now the one that is in place is not even working. So when people are protesting and you ask them, what are you protesting about? They will actually tell you this is what we're protesting about, right? And so these are not a bunch of people who just have a lot of time on their hands. They have nothing better to do than to protest. These are people who are actually very knowledgeable of what they're doing. Raymond, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Abby. And thank you, Professor. The reason I just wanted to add on to my question, and the reason why I pointed that out is essentially because I tend to think that our young people are not conscious of their actions. And from how I see it, is simply because most of our young people are unemployed. Most of them are tired, they are angry, they are frustrated. So it's very easy for one politician to point to an incident or a policy and just get them, do the things they do. And that's why our leaders have mastered that they don't have to actually negotiate with young people. They need to negotiate with the politicians who are pointing these young people into the directions that they do and end up fueling the actions that are done. And to my point, I don't think that young people in Africa have any revolutionary theory. I think that they are very reactive in their actions. That's why these actions are not sustained. They don't create any substantial change. And our leaders are aware of that. And that's why when the deals are cut, they are done with their peers and not the young people. So to my point, I think that time has come that young people go to the drawing board, do a lot of study, and come up with proactive theory that should guide their action and become more conscious of those actions. One of the colleagues has pointed out that many of them are paid off, they are bribed, because these are young people that can't do anything. They have nothing to lose. They are fatigued, they are angry, they are frustrated, they don't have jobs and the like. So just wanted to put that out there, and hopefully it can help us to reflect more on how we can take lead as young people. Thank you so much.
Right. Thank you so much.
Raymond, I think also maybe before we give it to our Tanzanian presenter, I think those qualities that you have talked about, being the young people being angry and so on, are the qualities of people who actually do a revolution, because the kind of the 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 kind of governance that is being exercised in Kenya at the moment will push them into a movement. Very soon, it's gonna be a huge movement and a revolution. And it's not that they don't know what they are not aware of what they are doing, but I think, to me, when they come together, I think that awareness is created. It is possible today to have a revolution of the young people because they feel the heat of poor governance more than anybody else.
Okay. All right. So this was a discussion also involving Tanzania. It was just not Kenya. Maybe it's because Kenya is where it's mostly happening. Yeah. So Francis, you had a question?
Yeah, of course. I have noted these differences, like now Gen Z are calling themselves less. It's different from Tanzania, where most of the young people are now aligning themselves to the ruling party, CCM, doing their things. But away from that, now, I think it was just last week, somebody was abducted and then found killed. How has it changed the atmosphere of Gen Z in Kenya? Because I think this is the very first time for you to find somebody dead after abduction. It is like a common thing to Tanzania to find some people disappearing.
Well, I'm surprised you think it's not common in Kenya. It's been happening since the protests erupted in June of last year, because most of the guys who took part in the protests just started turning up dead. They were missing. They would go missing for days, and then they would be found in a ditch, undressed and dead. So it is not something that is recent. It is something that has been going on a lot. And I think that is what the government is doing to mostly just quell the protests. Whether or not it's been successful is yet to be seen, but that is just one of the tactics that they've been using to people turn up dead all the time, and that is the problem. Are they gonna hold people accountable? Are we gonna see them hold because they're doing it in such a way that people are turning up dead where somebody, a member of parliament, can come and say, if it was up to me, 5,000 of them would have died. I would have killed 5,000 of them. And he can stand on a national platform and say that without consequence, right? So that's been happening a lot. I don't know if there's a solution just yet. Maybe Dr. Chacha, you can tell us about that, or anybody in the chat who was more knowledgeable on that. Oh, Dr. Choti.
What was the question?
Yeah, so Francis was talking about, just people turning up dead, people getting abducted, and then after a couple of days they turn up dead, right? So what are the Gen Zs doing about that?
Of course, what is happening in Kenya now is the fact that the people have now taken it into their hands, so that if the abductors who come and abduct the young people and they don't have an identification there, what happened is that some 3 weeks ago, actually these incidences of abduction have slowed down, because the people have now taken it into their hands that if they see anybody trying to abduct without identifying themselves as policemen or government agents and so on, they'll be lynched. And therefore, people have been, that has happened in Nakuru last week when they came to abduct a youth in Nakuru town, and people went there and told them to identify themselves. They were not able to identify, and they almost lynched them. They had to run away. So there are ways in which the society can be able to be concerned about these abductions and then have a response. Right now, it's not possible for these abductions technique to continue with the government because of the fear of the consequences of doing this with plainclothes police and so on, who are unable to identify themselves or who are masked and so on. So it's a rather, but the abduction itself can be a catalyst to a major organizations or a major regrouping of the youth against the government. So if they continue, this will be a catalyst to a lot of radical changes within the GNZs themselves against the state.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Chacha. So, Francis, so how are you Tanzanians dealing with your own abductions? You don't know.
Nobody is courageous enough to speak about those issues. Only activists.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe to add, I do work in Tanzania. Thanks, Nyonzo, for the question and also for your information. Compared Tanzania and Kenya, though they are neighbors, their historical events are different. The way Tanzanians approach issues, political and otherwise, is really different from Kenya. There's more agents among Kenyan youth or Kenyans as a people. Tanzanians are like laid back a little bit, very nice people generally, and they respect authority. They always leave everything to the leaders. So there's not a lot of demonstration agents in Tanzanian population. So leaders normally do what they have been elected to do, and the Tanzanians don't make noise. That's what I've observed for the last 10 years. I've been working in Tanzania.
Yeah, I mean, I have Tanzanian friends, so I can agree a little bit.
So basically, those issues for the activists,
I don't know if they can hear you.
NGOs, so you find very few people who are vocal. It's just last week that Maria Sarungi was abducted in Kenya.
Oh, yeah.
She's one of the activists in that.
Yeah.
Thanks. Chacha, my students have 2 minutes. Oh, by the way, students, thanks for showing up in good numbers. Just an announcement, quick one. Check my email. There's a link for watching the movie. Our class is 2 hours. 1 hour has been spent in this event. The next 1 hour, please use the link I shared to the movie and watch the movie for 1 hour. The movie is 2 hours. The Last King of Scotland. You can watch it 1 hour after this and then find some other time to finish watching it before Tuesday.
All right. Thank you. So
yeah,
that's
back to you, Abby.
Yeah, that's actually all the time we have today. Thank you so much for joining in.